Quotidie moria. Every day I die a little. It was one of Pius XII's favorite expressions when illness and the natural advance of old age began to mark his flesh.
This is how Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi writes in his memoirs. But before that weary body, before the labored breaths and the shadows over his eyes, there had been a different time. Vivid, restless, teeming with projects and fears. A time when Eugenio Pacelli was not yet Pope Pius XII. He was just a man of the church, hungry for order, and perhaps for love as well. It was in that time that Riccardo entered the scene. It was 1930, and something sparked between them. Soon they were no longer just doctor and patient, but two men bound by a deep understanding. With his homeopathic approach, Riccardo became a guide for Eugenio, a revealing mirror, a lay confessor. Eugenio entrusted everything to Riccardo, his body, his soul, and that undercurrent of restlessness that never gave him peace. Then, Eugenio became Pope, and Riccardo stayed by his side through the nightmare of the war. They both came out of it marked, but still standing. In the post-war years, as Rome began to breathe again, Riccardo was by then a star, celebrated as one of the great luminaries of 20th century medicine. Eugenio, on the other hand, was looking beyond. He dreamed of a re-Christianized Italy, and Europe as well. A world rebuilt on the Bible. But just at that moment, something breaks. The body of a woman is found on a beach near Rome. Her name was Wilma Montesi, and with that body, a past resurfaces. Or perhaps it is the present that, quite simply, stops pretending.
A young girl, Roman, from a quiet, modest family.
Francesco Grignetti tells us the story. He is a leading Italian crime reporter. He is also the foremost expert on the Wilma Montesi case. He has studied it for years. He has dissected it in every detail. He knows every fold, every shadow, every lie.
Her father was a carpenter, and right away, it becomes a mystery that first captivates the people of Rome, then all of Italy. How did she die? Why? What was she doing there? All that's known is that she left home without giving any explanation. She had no apparent reason to go to the seaside. It was April, not even bathing season. From there, a case unfolds that grows more and more mysterious, and step by step, draws in the highest circles of power of the time.
But what does the death of this young, unknown, completely ordinary girl have to do with the personal doctor of Pope Pius XII? To understand that, we need to go back and take a close look at a world made of rifles and gunpowder. So far, we've learned that Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi is a curious man, full of impulses and contradictions. Ophthalmologist, homeopath, papal archiator. He once loved racing cars. He still loves, far too much, gambling. And that love will never leave him. His thirst for risk and money is a ruin. It even leads him to sell stories to journalists, to sell himself, to sell his friend, the Pope. But beyond all that, there is also hunting. A true passion, which he pursues with the almost liturgical care reserved for real occasions. But one that puts him at odds with his friend Eugenio Pacelli.
Pius XII certainly loved all animals, but he had a particular tenderness for birds.
Riccardo himself writes this in his memoirs.
One day, one of them flew in through the window of Pius XII's office, fluttered lightly around the room, and then fell, exhausted, to the floor. Pius XII stood up, picked up the tiny panting body and called for Mother Pasqualina.
Poor little creature. Perhaps it's already dead.
Mother Pasqualina immediately made an accurate diagnosis. The poor little bird was simply hungry and numb from the cold. It quickly recovered, in fact, when the mother placed a bit of bread soaked in milk into its beak.
We'll call her Gret, like that other little bird we once had.
Thus decreed the Holy Father, and that is how Gret entered the Pope's life.
Riccardo, on the other hand, loves to shoot at birds. And he does it in the company of a few trusted friends. One of the closest is a Sicilian marquis, a worldly man, charming, broad-shouldered, liquid eyes, and a sly smile with a kind heart. Riccardo's hunting companion is named Ugo Montagna. Who is Ugo Montagna? Journalist Francesco Grignetti explains it to us once again.
A young man full of promise arrived in Rome from Sicily. It is said he was a smooth talker, a man who knew how to move in society. He managed to insert himself fairly early into the fascist regime. We're talking about the mid-1930s, and he connected with the golden youth of the fascist regime. At the time, the sons of the powerful were the sons of the fascist party leaders. This Montagna method is very interesting because we find it again, just the same, in the post-war period. He, just as he had latched onto the golden youth of the regime, with great nonchalance would latch onto the golden youth of the Republic, and in particular of the new powerful ones, namely of the Christian democracy. He became a close friend, drinking companion, dinner guest, and hunting partner of various sons of ministers and powerful men of the Christian democratic nomenclatura.
Di ministri o comunque di potenti nella nomenclatura democristiana.
In the 1950s, Christian democracy is the party that governs Italy. Founded in the aftermath of the war, it is a centrist, Catholic force backed by the Pope in the United States as a bulwark against communism.
Pius XII placed great emphasis on the need to preserve the unity of the Christian party.
Riccardo tells,
especially in countries where the communist threat is more serious, and where no other force, apart from the Christian one, can oppose it in numbers and with real effectiveness.
In this 1953, the Christian democracy dominates the Italian political scene. It is not just a party. It is a network, a culture, a capillary system that connects parish priests, entrepreneurs, ministers, and doormen. It is the backbone of Eugenio Pacelli's project to impose his Catholic model in Italy. Riccardo gets along wonderfully with Ugo Montagna. So much so that together they found a hunting club. They call it the St. Hubert Society, and not by chance. He is the patron saint of hunters and opticians. Perfect, then, for a hunter-ophthalmologist like Riccardo. The legal management of the St. Hubert Society is entrusted, naturally, to Riccardo's brother, the lawyer Giulio Galazzi. One day, the big opportunity comes. South of Rome, there's an estate, a truly royal estate. It's in the area of Capocotta, a forgotten place, but full of stories. That estate had once belonged to the kings of Italy. King Vittorio Emanuele II, himself a hunter, had chosen it for his hunts. He may even have died because of it, after catching malaria right there. After the war, and after the kings were driven out of Italy, Capocotta was left to rot in the brambles, abandoned, caught in a dispute between the state and the former royal family. And it's at this moment that Riccardo steps in. He moves forward. It's not clear how, or through whom, but he manages to lease the entire Capocotta estate through the Sant'Alberto Society, with the idea of giving it back to the Roman hunters. An estate open to the public, available to anyone who wanted to hunt there. At least in theory. In reality, Capocotta becomes a fiefdom. A private kingdom of Riccardo and Ugo Montagna. Access by invitation only. Only for members and friends. Only with a pass personally signed by Marquis Montaigne. And there, among hunting trips, lavish dinners, card games, and late-night conversations, Riccardo and Hugo build a world. A protected place. Untouchable. Visited by prelates, nobles, actresses, journalists. A parallel court with its own rules. And its own shadows. And it is right there, in that locked-up paradise, that everything starts to crack. Because one day, right on the beach, in front of Capocotta, in front of Riccardo's estate, someone finds a body. And there are no paved roads leading to that beach. Wilma Montesi could have reached that spot in only two ways. Either by sea, or by crossing the Capocotta hunting estate, something allowed only to members of the Sant'Uberto Society and to their most trusted friends. The newspapers dive straight into the case. Italians want to know how Wilma Montesi died, and whether a madman is roaming free in Rome. Perhaps Riccardo and Ugo Montaigne breathe a half sigh of relief when just 5 days after the body is found, and even before the funeral, the chief of police in Rome announces to the press the official cause of Wilma Montesi's death. Complications from a footbath.
Having chosen a rather secluded spot, after removing her shoes, garter belt, stockings, and skirt, Wilma entered the water. Going through her critical period in those very days, at the contact with the cold water, the unfortunate young woman was seized by a malaise and collapsed, unconscious. No one was able to see her. Wilma was dragged offshore and drowned miserably.
In 1953, in a Catholic and puritanical Italy, the female body is a taboo. People tiptoe around words as if they were unexploded mines. Her critical period means her menstrual cycle. Wilma had only wanted to cool her feet in the sea, but the cold water and her menstruation would have interacted in some mysterious way, causing her to faint. From there, the drowning, the current, the body carried to the beach in front of the St. Hubert estate. Menstruation and a footbath equal death. A theory that borders on the delusional, not to mention the offensive, and yet it is the official one at this moment. The police closed the case. Wilma Montesi, 21 years old, perhaps murdered, perhaps even assaulted, is handed over to the public imagination as the protagonist of a macabre joke. And for some, it is almost a relief. Because Riccardo, the Pope's doctor, a reserved man, respected, irreproachable, at least on the surface, and his associates from the St. Hubert Society would not have liked to be touched, even slightly, by an ugly piece of crime news. A pity for Wilma, of course. It's a tragedy. But better it ends this way. Only it doesn't. It doesn't end like that at all. On the 16th of October, a little-known journalist, a certain Silvano Muto, publishes an explosive article titled The True Story of Wilma Montesi.
Questo giornalista fu il primo a raccontare.
This journalist was the first to report, albeit in broad terms, with caution, without naming names, speaking of Mr. X and Mr. Y, that behind Wilma's death there were, in fact, parties involving drugs and sex that took place in that area.
According to the article, Wilma had attended a party at the Capocotta hunting estate as a guest of Ugo Montaigne, together with Piero Piccioni. Piero Piccioni is a well-known jazz musician, a refined bon vivant. He is engaged to Alida Valli, a star of Italian cinema who worked with Alfred Hitchcock in The Paradigm Case, alongside Gregory Peck, and in The Third Man with Orson Welles. But above all, and this is the point, Piero Piccioni is the son of the Deputy Prime Minister of the Italian government, Attilio Piccioni, one of the most powerful men in the Christian democracy. During a party, perhaps after taking drugs, Wilma Montesi is said to have suddenly fallen ill. Piero Piccioni and Ugo Montagna, thinking she was dead, allegedly put her in a car and abandoned her on the beach, right in front of the St. Hubert estate. But Wilma was still alive. She would have drowned on the shoreline, not killed by a premeditated plan, but by the irresponsibility and fear of two men, too powerful to get caught in a scandal. With this shocking article, 1953 comes to an end. Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi closes the year watching the macabre clown circus about to set up all around him, around his hunting estate, around his friends. No one has dared to drag him into the story, yet, but we can picture him with his jaw clenched, a small muscle twitching in his cheek, already wondering what might still happen in 1954. "1954 marks precisely the beginning of the end for Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi. Not because of a single event, but because of the accumulation. His reputation, his alliances, his role, everything starts to creak, and to lean toward the abyss. The spark that sets everything off is a lawsuit. A simple lawsuit for defamation. The lawsuit is filed in court by Piero Piccioni, the well-known musician, the son of the ultra-powerful Christian Democrat Attilio Piccioni. He presses charges against that obscure journalist who dared to write the article, The True Story of Wilma Montesi. Because the Montesi case is closed. The poor girl died from a lethal mix of menstruation and a footbath in the sea. And Piero Piccioni refuses to be smeared. He won't be painted as a depraved man or a murderer. That second-rate journalist will pay for it. What Piero doesn't know is that this lawsuit is a boomerang, and it's about to come flying back at him at supersonic speed.
The Carabinieri were assigned to investigate, and Colonel Pompei, who commanded the Carabinieri of Rome and was the director of the investigation, during the defamation trial took the stand and read a report that the Carabinieri had prepared on Ugo Montagna. The image that emerged of this Marquis Montagna was absolutely shocking, and as such, conclusions were quickly drawn. The Italians no longer had any doubts.
In Colonel Pompei's report, there is no fact directly connected to the death of Wilma Montesi, but there is a long, meticulous, and viciously poisonous portrait of Ugo Montagna, the friend, the business partner, the hunting companion of Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi. Orgies, drugs, sexual favors for powerful men, lies, fake noble titles, double lives. All of this was happening at the Capocotta hunting estate, Riccardo's estate.
It had a procedural effect for Salvato Muto, who went from defamer to hero of the free press, of investigative journalism, and the dominus of this trial. The Italians no longer had any doubts. But not only the Italians, the press, the opposition political parties, the internal enemies of the Christian democracy. From a media and political point of view, it was obviously an exceptional blow. Having recited that report, even with well-timed pauses. In short, Colonel Pompei turned out to be a seasoned actor on that occasion. The report did not actually contain any evidence connected to the case in question. It was all about the background. But that background was so sensational, so striking, it overturned the image of the Christian democracy.
di una democrazia cristiana.
and of the sons of the men of the Christian democracy. God-fearing and impeccable from a moral point of view.
Punto di vista morale.
So the Pompey report tears apart the image of the Christian democracy, the party of the devout, of the moralists, of the family men, of the church, of Pope Pius XII. And who is ready to ride this wave of indignation against the entire Italian ruling class? Who is ready to use the death of Wilma Montesi and everything that surrounds it as a political cudgel? The Italian Communist Party, of course. The strongest communist party in the Western world. The eternal opponent of the Christian democracy. And the Italian communists make a historic decision. From this moment on, it will be total war. Not just the presumed killer or the suspects will be targeted. Also, their friends, their business partners, their dinner companions, their wives, their husbands, their brothers, anyone who brushed against them, who covered for them, who raised a glass with them one night in Capocotta. And behind them, the real target will be the system itself, the Christian democracy, the church, the Pope. One revelation after another. One stain, real or alleged, after another. Everything will be dragged into the light and thrown to the press, to Parliament, to public opinion. A new genre begins. The show trial. Pietro Ingrajo opens the dance. He is the editor of l'Unità, the newspaper of the Italian Communist Party. He signs an article that enters history. It is the 7th of February, and in his piece, for the first time, a phrase appears that will weigh on Italian politics for decades to come. The moral question.
The judicial case has turned into a serious moral question. It is in vain that the ruling party protests.
And then, blow after blow, strike after strike. In Parliament, another leading figure of the Communist Party, Giancarlo Pajetta, coins a historic insult. Capocottari, those Capocotta types. It is a way of saying depraved, corruptors, the ruling caste. And Capocotta, the hunting estate of Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi and Ugo Montagna, becomes the symbol of everything that is wrong with Catholic, respectable, Christian, democratic Italy. What begins to take shape is an experiment without precedent. A political, media, and judicial laboratory. An attempt to open, through a scandal, a chasm beneath the feet of power. And into that chasm falls Riccardo as well. Colonel Pompey's dossier speaks openly about him.
Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi is the sole administrator of the St. Hubert Society, whose management was entrusted, and still is, to Marquis Ugo Montagna. He is a partner in the real estate company Gruppo Romano Abitazioni, of which Ugo Montagna himself is the sole administrator, and he is also the sole administrator of the real estate company Bella Vista. The headquarters of the St. Hubert Society is located at 142 Corso Trieste, and the headquarters of the other two real estate companies is at number 4 Via Sistina. On Via Sistina, Professor Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi as his fully equipped internal medicine and ophthalmology office, while at 1042 Corso Trieste, on the first floor, is the private residence of the physician to His Holiness, Pius XII.
Everything about Riccardo is published. His home and office addresses, his properties, his company shares, even his income and taxable earnings. The newspaper Corriere della Sera writes on the 17th of March, 1954.
Galeazzi-Lisi, for the year 1951, was notified of a taxable income of 3 million lire,
which today would amount, more or less, to 51,000 euros.
Instead, for 1952, the taxable income challenged for the Pope's doctor was 8,300,000 lire.
They correspond, more or less, to 136,000 euros today.
Other tax disputes, for smaller amounts, were raised against lawyer Giulio Galeazzi, his brother.
None of this has anything to do with the poor Wilma Montesi. The Montesi trial has become a weapon, and the target is not the truth, but reputation. L'Unità, the official newspaper of the Communist Party, on the 13th of March, publishes a photo of Riccardo beneath a portrait of Pius XII, with the headline, "Another friend of Marquis Montagna," and the caption, "Count Galeazzi-Lisi, the Pope's doctor and business partner of the adventurer Marquis Ugo Montagna." It is worth contemplating the photographic composition, which achieves a small masterpiece of subliminal propaganda. In the photo, we see Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi wearing a white coat, standing, likely in his office. In front of him, hanging on the wall, there is a portrait of Pope Pius XII. The Pope's face dominates the scene, even though it is technically just part of the decor. But on closer inspection, something subtler emerges. The proportions of the frame and the arrangement of the elements follow the golden ratio with striking precision, just like the Mona Lisa and the Vitruvian Man, both masterpieces by Leonardo da Vinci. And the focal point of this spiral is not Riccardo. He is not the main character of the headline, the another friend of Marquis Montagna. At the exact golden point, where even the Renaissance painters knew the eye would naturally be drawn, there is the Pope's face. He, Pacelli, is the true center of the image. Riccardo, instead, falls along the lower arc of the curve. He is already in a position of subordination, of instrument. This is the double meaning of the photograph. On the surface, it seems to speak about Galeazzi-Lisi, and in fact, it does. It exposes him, it brings him into focus. But it also suggests, without saying so directly, that the distance between Pius XII and Ugo Montagna may no longer be so clear. That because of Riccardo, perhaps, even the Pope has slipped one step closer to the shadows of Capocotta. Vatican City goes to DEFCON 2, the level which, in military terms, indicates an increased likelihood of nuclear war. L'Osservatore Romano, the official newspaper of the Holy See, has remained silent on the Montesi case until now. But now, it erupts.
It is a shameful perfidy, not only to choose a photo of Professor Galeazzi-Lisi that shows a portrait of the Holy Father, but also to print it in such a way that the Pope appears to be the main figure in the shot.
We do not know what happens to Riccardo behind the secret walls of the Vatican. Who questions him? About what? In what terms? And with what tone? Nor how he reacts or defends himself. Yet we sense something when, on March 26th, the ARI news agency
denies a rumor picked up by another agency and reproduced by some newspapers, according to which the Pontifical Archiater Professor Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi would be leaving his post.
Riccardo does not give up. Perhaps, if he resigned, it would only make things worse for everyone. And yet, the worst for him is still to come. On April 6, 1954, the Italian newspaper La Stampa headlines, "A new character enters the scene." His name is Eugenio Zucchi, 61 years old, wine merchant. He knows nothing about Wilma Montesi, But he has a personal score to settle, and now is the time to do it. The defamation trial, which is supposed to determine whether Wilma Montesi really died during an orgy, as journalist Silvano Muto had written, has now turned into an open microphone. A speaker's corner. It is enough to know some disgraceful secret about Ugo Montagna or Piero Piccioni, and the courtroom becomes a stage.
It was 1944. I was urgently summoned by Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi to his office on Via Sistina. Riccardo explained to me that a report had been filed with the Allies accusing me of collaborationism.
During the Nazi occupation of Rome, collaboration was not yet a formal crime. It was a moral fault, a social disgrace, an accusation whispered in courtyards. But with the birth of the Republic, everything changed. Those who had helped the invader through denunciations, raids, or acts of violence could be prosecuted for political or military collaboration with the enemy. The law tried to distinguish the resistance fighters from the traitors, but the line was often thin.
Ugo Montagna was also accused, but he enjoyed protection within the judiciary. Giulio Galazzi, Riccardo's brother and a lawyer, joined the meeting and confirmed the seriousness of the situation. I began to suspect that the three of them wanted to set me up. They said the case was in the hands of a corrupt commissioner, someone susceptible to bribes. They proposed the payment of 3 million lire. Half would go to the commissioner, to bribe him, and the other half to the intermediaries, meaning Riccardo, his brother, and a man named Rocco. After leaving the office, I asked myself why I should pay others for access to someone I could reach on my own. I did manage to meet the corrupt commissioner. He said he knew nothing about the report, nor about any bribes he was supposed to receive. I had been deceived, and I decided to take revenge. I set a trap. I pretended to accept the extortion and summoned Ugo Montagna to hand over the money, but I had a lawyer and a colonel, both friends of mine, hidden in the office. When Montagna repeated the whole story and demanded the money, the two witnesses came out of hiding. Montagna collapsed. He begged for mercy and asked for a way out. He agreed to sign a written confession in which he admitted the attempted extortion and promised to leave Rome and start a new life. The declaration was drafted with the assistance of the lawyer and under the supervision of the colonel. It seemed like everything was over, but a few days later Montagna came back to me, crying and pleading. He feared for his life. He managed to convince me to destroy the compromising document, appealing to my compassion.
Is it over? No, because Montagna, no longer under the threat of the written and signed confession, took his own revenge. And he really did report Zucchi for collaboration. But Zucchi, once again, was acquitted, and when the Montesi case erupts, he sees it as an opportunity to take his revenge in return. Revenge is not that cold and surgical thing we see in Tarantino's films. It is, as René Girard writes,
an endless, interminable process, lacking any clear distinction between the act punished by revenge and revenge itself.
If you take revenge on me, I will take revenge on you. Then you will take revenge again.
A chain reaction with rapidly fatal consequences. That is why revenge is everywhere the object of the strictest prohibition.
Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi and his brother Giulio, overwhelmed by the mudslinging in the press, respond with an official statement.
Our relations with Mr. Zucchi were strictly of a professional nature, with the exclusion of any dealings of another kind. In the medical field, in fact, Zucchi was introduced to Professor Galazzi as early as 1940, with further consultations and treatments in the following years, as documented in the clinical chart. In the legal field, Zucchi entrusted a few matters to lawyer Galazzi, which were carried out in perfect order. We reserve the right to take legal action regarding the slanderous insinuations contained in the memorandum.
The entire Zucchi affair and the alleged extortion committed by Riccardo and his brother Giulio will have no consequences. No investigation, no inquiry. It is nothing but mud pouring down on Riccardo and his family. In September, Attilio Piccioni, the father of Piero, resigns as Minister of Foreign Affairs. 2 days later, his son and Ugo Montagna are arrested. In this climate of general disgust, the Italian Prime Minister even fears that the left may be about to launch a street uprising, taking advantage of the momentum of public outrage. He orders the prefectures to prepare for possible
acts of intimidation against the powers of the state orchestrated by the social communist opposition after the 2 arrests and the resignation. They must be vigorously repressed by the police.
The Italian establishment goes to DEFCON 1. Nuclear war is imminent, or already underway. The counteroffensive begins. The first target is the communist president of the province of Rome, lawyer Giuseppe Soggio, who is defending the journalist Silvano Muto in the trial. A man who, until now, has played the role of moralizer, a scourge of Christian democratic morals. But his closet is full of suits and ghosts. A newspaper publishes photos of lawyer Soggio and his wife, captured as they enter and exit a clandestine brothel in Rome. At that brothel, the communist lawyer, long considered a champion of moral rigor, is a regular client. His particular sexual inclination, today, would be described as cuckold. He is a man who derives pleasure from watching his wife engage in sexual relations with another man. In the role of the so-called bull, the one who satisfies the woman, there is a young man named Sergio Rossi. 2 details make the story explosive. First, he is paid by the couple. Second, he is reportedly underage. In a single blow, the Communist Front collapses. The Italian Communist Party immediately suspends the lawyer for moral unworthiness and removes him from the presidency of the province of Rome. The judiciary opens an investigation for procuring prostitution. He disappears for a few days. The newspapers call him fugitive. In the days that follow, the pro-government press, until then so prudish and puritanical, cautious with words, and sex-phobic, goes wild. It seriously debates whether Soggio hired the bull to satisfy his own libido or that of his wife. A legal philosophical discussion bordering on the absurd. Was the boy meant more for him or for her? Who derived more pleasure? Who should be punished? Just like in the mythological dispute between Zeus and Hera over who experienced more pleasure during lovemaking, here too the issue is not the act itself, but the accounting of pleasure. Only, in this case, the one who loses ends up in prison. By now, it is a war of all against all. The sexual shaming is total, all-encompassing. And commenting on the case, L'Osservatore Romano, the official newspaper of the Holy See, publishes a headline that reads like both a warning and a verdict.
Hodi mihi, kras tibi.
Today, it's me. Tomorrow, it's you. By now, the Montesi affair is being followed by newspapers all over the world. The Colombian daily El Espectador sends a very young Gabriel García Márquez to Rome. He would later become the author of 100 Years of Solitude and a Nobel Prize winner in literature. Perhaps even in those days, he was already attuned to the streaks of magical realism in the story. In July, Ugo Montagna and Piero Piccioni are formally indicted. A new trial begins. And what about Riccardo? At the heart of this scandal-shaking Rome, the Church and the Christian Democrats, his name is being devoured by national gossip. He is involved, but not indicted. Exposed, but not defended. Meanwhile, the Vatican begins to crack. Eugenio Pacelli, Pope Pius XII, the man who kept him at his side for years, what will he do now? Will he protect him, or cast him aside in silence to save himself? For Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi, the real trial is the one unfolding in the fragile bond with his friend, the Pope. We'll uncover it all in the next episode, because this is not the end.
You have just listened to the 5th episode of Riccardo, the Man Who Blew Up the Pope, a podcast by Rob Ferraro, produced in association with Vittoria Ursi.